Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Bhakti Lens podcast. So I wanted to just dive straight in. Mayapur is behind the scenes. Mayapur, if you could just throw up a picture. So I wanted to start with this interesting picture. It's one I just lifted off your Facebook, which is of you as a teenager. And I heard an interesting story that while you were in your teens, you heard a devotional song. Is that right? Do you want to expand on that story where you heard a song and then you wanted to know more about? If you could expand on that, would be great.
Sure, I could. But my first contact with Bhakti was before that.
Okay.
So how do you want me to go before that?
No, go before that. Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, my first contact with Bhakti was actually when I was 12.
Okay.
This picture was taken when I was 13. And I was visiting my sister and her family in New York City on the Lower East Side. They lived a couple blocks away from the first temple of the Hare Krishna movement at 26 2nd Avenue. And Srila Prabhupada had recorded a record album, which some of you may not have any idea what that is. But anyway, it was a record album, and it was called the Happening Album. On one side was Srila Prabhupada chanting Hare Krishna. On the other side, Prabhupada was chanting the Guru Vastika. And the gentleman who had created that record album wanted to sell it. He had a store called the Krishna Store where he sold clothes and posters and things like that from India. And he would play the record constantly so people would buy it. And I used to walk around the Lower East Side while I visited my sister, and I would always go in that shop and I would listen to this recording of Srila Prabhupada chanting. So this was my first contact with Bhakti and devotees of Bhakti. And it was a couple years after that, so about a year after this photograph was taken, that I used to listen to the radio every morning. And all of a sudden I heard this song. It's a song that we play in all of our Hare Krishna temples, right? Maybe, I don't know, maybe you could even play a snippet of it. It's the one that George Harrison produced, where Yamuna was singing. It was the Brahma Samhita. And I heard this. And, on the radio, sometimes they announce a song before they play it, and sometimes they announce it after they play it.
Yeah.
And when I turned on the radio, the song had already started, and they never announced it. They must have announced it before I turned on the radio. I was completely enchanted. I was like, what is that song? I was thinking about it, every waking minute. And I started listening to the radio compulsively, hoping that they would play it again and that I would get to hear what it was. And finally, I heard it again and I wrote it down, the Radha Krishna temple. I was just so, I don't know, it was just like being pulled in. And then I ended up having a dream that I was in this huge record store in New York City, probably one of the biggest record shops in the world at that time. And that I owned every record in that shop, except that one. And in my dream, I was frantically looking for this record. And I woke up wide awake at about 2 a.m. and I wrote down this dream. I later found that, some years later, when I actually moved into the ashram, I found that I had this dream. I actually went to the record store and I asked for that album. And they had to go to a warehouse to get it. It wasn't in their main shop. And, I remember bringing it home. And inside, the outside cover was a photograph of Radha London Ishwar. So those were the first Hare Krishna ISKCON deities I ever saw was on the cover of that album. On the back cover was this smiling picture of Srila Prabhupada. And inside also were 2 paintings. One of Radha Krishna, one of what's called Srinathji. These are the same paintings that appeared on the original 2-volume set of the Krishna book. So I took those and I put them on my wall. I didn't know what they were or anything. And there was an explanation of philosophy also inside the album. It was an album that had a cover that folded in half. And inside there was reading material. So I read it, but I didn't understand it at all. I was like, what are they talking about? But I took out the pictures and put them up. And I used to listen to it frequently. And it was that those pictures from that record that ended up bringing me to a Hare Krishna temple.
So what upbringing did your household have a certain faith or?
Oh yeah, my parents were Jewish, and my family, at least in America, was and still is a very famous household name among Jewish families. I was born in the Manischewitz family. My great-grandfather had immigrated from Russia and started a Jewish food business. And my father had gradually taken that over from his father. By the time I was born, he was the president of the company. Later, he became the CEO of the company. And when I was very young, actually later on also 2 times in my life, my father was the president of a Jewish temple. So we lived in New York, we lived literally right next door, right across the street from a very big, what was called the Spanish Portuguese synagogue, a very big synagogue that you can still go to today, right across the street from Central Park. And religion was a huge part of our lives. I mean, we would worship at least twice a week at the temple, and we weren't strictly observant Jews, but we did have the Sabbath meal at home, and we kept kosher in the home. I was engaged in religious studies from a very young age. When I was a teenager, I studied at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. And then my oldest sister went to Israel when I was 1 year old. My sisters were much older than I. And I spent a lot of time in Israel. You know, we would go to visit my sister. And so from the time, I mean, I went first when I was 3 for her wedding. And then regularly we were going to Israel, and I was spending quite a lot of time there. And I remember that practically everything in our house was religious oriented. So the books, you know, the majority of the books had something to do with philosophy or with religion. The majority of the artwork. My mother was very involved in religious charity. She headed both national and international charities that were associated with religion in some way. So it was really permeating my whole life.
Right. So you had an inclination towards like spirituality, would you say, or some religiosity? You had some regularity with that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, it was, I mean, religion was just a huge important part of our lives. When I was 4, I distinctly remember where I was standing, where my mother was sitting, everything. I went to my mother and I said, "Why are we Jewish?" And she said, "Because my mother is Jewish." And I said, "Why is she Jewish?" She said, "Because her mother is Jewish." And I said, "That's silly. We should do things because they're true," which she didn't appreciate very much. And then when I was 8, I read an article in the encyclopedia about reincarnation. And I said, this is what I believe, which again, you know, the rabbis and my religious teachers weren't very thrilled with that. But I wrote a whole paper about reincarnation and why I accepted reincarnation. And when I was 9, I got a big map of India that I put on my wall. And I got some little dolls. I don't know if you've seen them. They're like those little touristy dolls that are dressed up in different traditional Indian costumes and doing different, you know, village stuff. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen that kind of thing, like in airport tourist shops. So I got a whole bunch of those, and I put them up all over my room. And I said to my mother, "I want to wear a sari." So at that point, there were hardly any Indians in the United States. The government had strict quotas on people from India. I didn't know anybody from India. And she was able to get some friend of hers who visited India to kind of sew me a sari out of some silk saffron cloth. And so I used to wear that.
So this was at the age of 9?
I was 9, yeah.
Okay. So you had an inclination to just even wear a sari.
Yeah, that would have been in 1964.
Wow. Yeah, so I mean, this is I suppose, Michael, if you're watching, if we could share some of the pictures of Mother Urmila through the years, because Urmila Devi, you've not just thrown a sari on now, you just explained you were 9 years old, but this inclination was there. And then, so...
Now that was right after I moved into the ashram. That was a passport picture when I was 18.
Oh, this is a passport picture.
It's a passport picture taken when I was 18, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's
Now,
fully fledged.
It's funny with this one. See, we didn't have real saris in those days in ISKCON. Hardly anyone had real saris. That was just a piece of cloth. And you see how it's connected over there? We used to, it was very heavy cloth. And we would pin the cloth over our head like this.
Okay.
Keep it on. And because for the passport picture, you had to have your head uncovered. So I'd taken it off my head, but you can see it's so pinned like that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's like a makeshift hoodie, sari.
Something like that. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The whole thing was makeshift. I mean, I remember when we were at the airport in Chicago selling Srila Prabhupada's books, and this one man came up to me and said, you know, you look like a bunch of clowns. And I thought, how offensive is that? And then I kind of looked around and I thought, you know, we really do look like a bunch of
clowns. Yeah. Well, you see from another perspective. So. How did you assimilate into like the culture of Bhakti? So you've listened to that music, and then you visited a temple. How did you go from there to visiting?
Well, as I said, I got those two pictures that I put up on my wall, and I was in my school, secondary school, high school, in the library, and one of the other students had a Krishna book. And the Krishna book had the same picture on the front. And this was not a student that I really knew. I knew his name. His name was Bill Trengrove, but he wasn't like part of my circle of friends even. Yeah. And I said, I have that picture on my wall. And he said, would you like to borrow the book? So during the study hall, I'm looking through this book and I'm just in trance, you know, again, and I gave it back at the end of the study hall. And he said, you know, I regularly visit the temple. Would you like to come with me? I'm like, temple? What temple? You know, what are you talking about? So he said, well, I go every Sunday into New York to the temple. Would you like to come with me? And I said, sure. You know, I remember I was 14. I remember telling my parents, you know, this Sunday I'm going to go with this guy to the temple. They're like, do you even know this guy? I'm like, no, he's just one of the other kids in my school. I said, you know, what's this temple? You know, I said, I don't know, just some temple.
Wow.
My parents were very liberal-minded, and my mother was hesitant, but they were like, okay. And so that's how I first visited a Hare Krishna temple.
So why did he bring that book into school? What?
I don't know. He was regularly going. He was going every Sunday to the temple.
Right.
And he was at that time chanting 16 rounds, following the principles, and regularly reading the books. He didn't end up fully becoming a Hare Krishna devotee. I mean, I met him many years later at a Rath Yatra, and he had taken up something path. But at that time, he was very into Krishna consciousness. So he was going to the temple.
Okay, so then you visited the temple. So what happened? Was it the aesthetic that you were interested in? Was it the philosophy, the music?
It was a philosophy. It was a philosophy. So the first time we visited, one of the ladies talked philosophy to me for 2 hours. And I remember when we were leaving, we take a subway to the bus station and then a bus. And I was at the subway platform and I looked at Bill and I said, I couldn't repeat anything she said, but I completely agree with it. I said, as far as I'm concerned, you know, this is it. This is the truth. And then we went he said, well, you want to come with me next week? And I said, sure. So I came the next week, and then I asked one of the other lady devotees, what do I have to do to join? And she didn't say chant or follow the principles or anything. You know, she saw me with this guy, and I guess she thought we were a thing. You know, maybe she thought he was my boyfriend or something. And you know, maybe she thought I was 18 or 20. I don't know. And she just said, we have no room. You'll have to get your own apartment. You know, you'll have to get your own flat. And I'm like, you know, I was 14. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I can't practice this process. You know, it was dependent on getting my own flat. And I was like, okay, well, that's the end of that. And so then I didn't go back. I didn't go back. I mean, after that, whenever anyone asked me, you know, what do you believe? And I said, I believe in Hare Krishna. And they said, are you practicing it? And I'm like, no, because I thought I had to get my own flat to practice it. So I said, no, we're not.
The naivety.
Yeah, yeah.
So okay, so then we've got this kind of late teens. I'm guessing this confused state of like, okay, to join the Hare Krishnas, I need to have my own apartment. And
Right.
then, so how did you go from that to actually practicing something? Like what
Well,
was
I
the
have been
journey?
doing my own kind of meditation for a long, long, long time.
Okay.
And my understanding of spirituality was impersonal. My understanding was that, I was going to become one with God. So I would meditate and I would try to become one with God. So the summer I was 17, I almost succeeded. I was meditating and I felt like I was merging with God.
Wow.
And I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do at all. I basically got out of my meditation and said, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. And then I was very disturbed because from the time I was 4, if anybody said, what do you want to do with your life? I'd say, I want to find God. Say, I don't care about a career or family, or I just want to find God. And I kind of found him, and then I didn't like him, was the way I had understood it, like here I finally found God. I finally found the impersonal light, and I didn't like it. So I thought, well, now what do I do? And I finally achieved my goal in life, and I decided I didn't want it. So I thought, well, I guess I'll just be a materialist. Long story short, that didn't go very well. So I would really not recommend materialistic life, give it about 1/4 of a star. Like, it really is not what it's cracked up to be. But I tried, went in, full on for a couple months. And by that time I was already in college. So I'd already started university. And then one day I just said, I don't know who you are, God, but you got to help me. I said the Lord's Prayer from the Bible. I said the Shema Yisrael from Judaism, and I chanted Hare Krishna. And I said, I don't know who you are, what you are. Help me out here. This is not working. And then I ended up finding Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. One of my best friends, her boyfriend's roommate, had received Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita from a Hare Krishna devotee on the street. And when I was with my girlfriend visiting her boyfriend, the book was on the floor. And I said, isn't that the Hare Krishna book? And her boyfriend's roommate said, yeah, you want to read it? I'm like, yeah. He said, well, I bought it. I never read it. So I took it back to my room, and nobody saw or heard from me for a couple days. I didn't go to my classes. I didn't go to meals. I don't think I slept. I was just reading this Bhagavad Gita, and I was like, yes, 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 this is it. This is it. The main feelings I had when I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, one was that I already knew all this stuff. I felt like someone had taken things that I knew but had never been able to express and put them in a book. And that to me was mystical. It was like only God could do this. And the other thing is just like I felt like all my questions were being answered and everything I needed to know was there. So then I decided that I wanted to find a way to join the Hare Krishna movement. So we're going to go back to that record album. So the university I was in had a program where everyone had to work at a job in January and February.
Okay.
It could be a paid or volunteer job, but you had to work at a job. So this university closed down and everybody had to get a job.
Okay.
So I got it. I was able to get a job in Chicago. My university was in Vermont, Bennington, Vermont, but the job I got was in Chicago. And so I still had that record album. And there was a listing of the temple in Chicago, but the temple had moved. And there was no Google then. Like you couldn't, no one's going to understand this unless they're my age. But if you wanted to find a place, you had to call the operator for that area code. Okay. And the operator could only look up places in that area code.
Okay.
So the temple had moved to the suburbs. And I called the area code for Chicago, and they said, she said, we have a Mr. Radhakrishna. That was it, And so I just thought, I guess the temple's closed. So while I was working, I was a tour guide in a museum. I would chant the Ishopanishad every day from the record album. So I'd sit at work. I didn't so much chant Hare Krishna because there was no explanation of the mantra. And I didn't want to chant something I didn't understand. So I would chant the Ishopanishad. And, I was there for 2 months. After 6 weeks, I ran into a brahmachari on the train. Turned out the temple was 2 blocks from me.
No way.
2 blocks away. And so I went to the temple. I had been staying with a friend, and I went to the temple, and I said, can I stay here? Now, I was only 17, so technically they shouldn't have let me do that. But anyway, they did. And the temple president just said, we wake up early, we follow these principles. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And so, yeah, that was, if I go back a little bit, this was a time, although I was chanting and I wanted to find the temple, you're in university and you're thinking, what do I want to do with my life? So I'm riding the train to work every morning at 6 o'clock. And everyone on the train looked like they would rather be someplace else other than going to work. They were all like,
yeah.
And people today complain about everybody on their phones, but everybody was on their newspapers. It was the same thing. Everybody was behind their newspapers looking like they just would rather be any place else in the world. And I thought, okay, great. I'll find a career. And then after 10, 15 years, I'll look like these guys. So I was really questioning, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I thought, I want to do something where I'll wake up every day joyfully. Also, another thing I was looking for was a way to be spiritual 24 hours a day. Every system of religion or spirituality was compartmentalized. Like you had your meditation time, you have your prayer time, you have your worship time, and then you have the rest of your life. And I'll say frankly that I meet a lot of Hare Krishna devotees who think like that. They think, this is the work that I have to do, too bad that I have to work, and this is my sadhana time, and they're like in different universes.
Right.
So, but I was looking for an integrated. I was looking for, I want to be spiritual when I'm getting dressed. I want to be spiritual when I'm shopping. I want to be spiritual always. And I wanted something that was joyful. So I stayed at the temple. This was the first time I stayed overnight. And I get up from Mangal Artik and I'm like, okay, that's what I want. I want to get up and have a party in the morning. So,
bang the drums at 4:35 in the morning.
Bang the drums at 4:30 in the morning, yeah.
So I'm going to just reflect back a few things. So you had this experience where you're almost entering like a void that is this impersonal idea.
It wasn't a void, it was...
Or a light.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't like that feeling.
No.
So then we've moved on to then finding the Bhagavad Gita by Srila Prabhupada. And you just kind of, no one saw you for a few days. You just immersed yourself in studying that.
Yes.
So with our students as well, over lockdown, they've, like the ones that have been with us for about 18 months to 2 years now, they're kind of feeling like that. They're feeling, this is just bliss. And so what would your advice be for the new students that are just signing up, but they're just about to crack open the Bhagavad Gita? How should they, because it's quite heavy, like they look at it, they see how thick it is, they see, where do I start? Am I going to understand it? What advice would you have for someone who's just going to crack open the Bhagavad Gita? What would you say?
Well, this is going to sound really funny, but I produced a book to help you understand the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
So you can check it out.
What's it called?
It's called Illustrated Introduction. Bhagavad Gita Illustrated Introduction. It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. Okay. Our magic tech guy in the background might be able to just Google that and put a little link in there. I do have some pictures of some books that I actually have of yours, which we'll share as well. But so you've got an illustrated.
But I would suggest some kind of, so I've written a very simplified study guide it's really for ages 5 to 95. If any of your students are 96, they're not allowed to buy it, but anybody else. And it has a page of background it shows the family tree and a page that describes the background. It has some of the key verses to memorize. And in the back, it has summaries of all the chapters and then questions and answers. So it's a very, very simple study guide. Another really nice study guide to the Bhagavad Gita was written by H.G. Goswami. And I would also highly recommend his book, where he summarizes the themes of the Bhagavad Gita. Yes.
I do have that book. Yeah, I've read it. It's nice. It's like I describe it as like a pivot table where you've got one theme and he's drawn out all of the areas where that theme comes up. Right, it's like a thematic version.
It was really, really well done.
Yeah, I enjoyed reading that one. Okay, so
and the other thing is join a class.
Right.
Join a class. There's a lot of classes that discuss the Bhagavad Gita, and it's wise to get a view of the Bhagavad Gita, just the verses, and understand how they fit together, as well as going deeply into the purpose. So you want to kind of do both. You want to overview the verses, get a sense of what Krishna is saying with the holistic viewpoint, and then you also go deep verse by verse.
Okay, I'll just reflect that back. So we've got like get study guides, get Urmila Mataji's study guide, get as many study guides as you can that are bhakti oriented, and then get a macroscopic view, like an overall view, holistic view, by just looking at the verses, so that you get an idea of the conversation. That would be a great start. Actually, that really helped me. So yeah, nice that you reminded me of that. And then
that was one of the things that really turned my own study around once I did that.
Okay.
I mean, I'd read the Bhagavad Gita so many times, and when I said, okay, I'm going to also just look at the verses, just go through the verses. I mean, another thing is you can get audiobooks like that. Okay, I just sent you in WhatsApp a link to our study guide. You can also get audiobooks that have just going through the verses. And you can get audiobooks of reading the whole Bhagavad Gita. So I've also found that extremely helpful.
Okay, I've just put that link. That link will come up on the screen there. Okay, that's good. So what will people gain from, say they've got the Bhagavad Gita? Because what we do is we send out the Bhagavad Gita to our students. So what about the people who they've just got it on the side? What are they going to gain from Bhagavad Gita? Like sometimes there's that fear of like, am I going to understand it? But there needs to be some kind of goal. Like what are they going to get from?
Well, the Bhagavad Gita is kind of a magical book. I don't know if you ever really understand it completely, which is the beauty of it. Just like some people want to watch a movie 10 times, to find all the. You can read the Bhagavad Gita 10,000 times, 100,000 times, and every time you're going to find some new jewel and some new whoa and some new insight. It's not just a book. You're in a conversation with God when you're reading the Bhagavad Gita, and it's unlimitedly broad and deep and sweet. At the same time, even one reading, you can get a basic idea of so many things. Now, what are you going to get out of the Bhagavad Gita? Well, you'll learn how to live your life with a thrill at every moment. You'll learn how to live your life always in truth, not being affected by the ups and downs of the world. You'll learn how to spiritualize your livelihood. That's one of the main messages that Krishna is giving to Arjuna. How do you have your work in the world connect you spiritually? How do you move through the world as a spiritual person? You'll learn who you really are.
That's interesting. You said you spiritualize your livelihood.
Yes.
Could you expand on that?
Well, Arjuna was in government. Arjuna worked in government. I mean, at that time, it was royalty. He was a prince. And he was also a military person. So he was thinking that, I don't know how I can use my career spiritually. It seems like it's really problematic. And if I want to be a spiritual person, I have to walk away from my career. I have to walk away from my livelihood. And I have to just, be a monk somewhere and meditate. And at one point, Krishna kind of indulges that and says, well, if you really want to do it, this is how you can be a meditative monk. And then Arjuna says, maybe I don't want to do that. But most of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining how to do your livelihood in the proper consciousness so that you're not touched by the negativity of the world, that you're not affected by the ups and downs of life. that you live a life full of not only external prosperity, which he talks about in chapter 3 particularly, but also internal prosperity. How you feel that you gain the greatest thing and there's nothing greater to gain. How you see your real self and you relish and rejoice in the self. You figure out what your nature is, what your abilities are, what your propensities are, and you see how that fits into the plan of the Supreme and how that fits into the plan of the whole, and how you can maintain your identity as a detached spiritual being and at the same time see who you perfectly are in this world, how you fit into the plan of the universe in this world, such that you can add to the glory and beauty of this world while awakening your real inner self to enlightenment.
Sounds good.
It is.
Well, I hope that has inspired someone to crack open that Bhagavad Gita that is sitting on their shelf. That's really nice. So yeah, we learn about ourselves, and yeah, that's spiritualizing your livelihood. That's a really interesting concept, because that's that compartmentalizing that you were talking about. Like, we have, this is my religiosity or my spirituality. This is over here. That happens at this time or on this day,
That's
and then
right.
I go to work. It's like
That's
we kind of go.
It's like they have a pie, and this piece is my spirituality. This is my family. This is my work. This is my entertainment. This is my health. And they're just little pieces there. And again, I see a lot of bhakti practitioners even think this way. They think the main thing of bhakti is learn how to chant Hare Krishna, learn how to offer your vegetarian food to Krishna, learn how to read the scriptures. And, oh, it's too bad you have to work. What a shame. If you were really spiritual, you'd give everything up. But that's not the message of the Bhagavad Gita at all. That was Arjuna's misunderstanding. That was exactly Arjuna's misunderstanding. And over again, Krishna's like, Mama nusmam yujacha. Think of me while you're doing your duty. Be in transcendental consciousness while you're doing your work in the world.
Very nice.
You could say justifiably that the Bhagavad Gita is a treatise on yoga. And you could also say justifiably that the Bhagavad Gita is a treatise on love. And you could say justifiably that the Bhagavad Gita is a treatise on spiritualizing your career. And some other things as well.
And that'd all be correct.
They would all be correct.
Wow. So can we move on to how you got into education, like being a head teacher and so on?
I had
and
kids.
So forth?
Is the simple answer. I got married, I had kids, and people used to ask me to watch their kids. And then I was asked to watch a whole bunch of kids. And I hadn't the foggiest notion of what to do with them. What do I do with all these kids that I'm watching? When our first child was like 2. So would you also watch my kid? Would you watch my kid? And pretty soon I had, like 10 kids I was watching, and like, what do I do with these kids? So very fortunately, after I had our second kid, I met this devotee, God's sister, Jyotirmayi, and she said, this is what you do with them. She gave me a curriculum, and she trained me, she became my mentor. And at that time, we were running a preschool. Her son and our daughter, my second child, were only about 1 year old. And we started a preschool for children age 1 to 2.5. And you think, how much can you do with kids that age? But we did a lot. I mean, we had a great time. And I found that I loved it. And I found that her mentorship awakened in me something that had been there my whole life. That I'd always been a teacher. I was kind of wired to be a teacher, but I didn't know it. I mean, there's all these stories, fiction and nonfiction, about the person who has some mentor or some teacher that wakes them up to their real identity and their real vocation, right? Isn't that kind of a popular theme? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in books and movies and like that. You just meet that right person who just says, you have ability in this. And they're like, really? I do? And they're like, oh, wow, I do. So it was like that. It was very much like that. And then I gradually got into academic teaching, and then I had left my university study to move in the ashram. I finished my university study, and then I went on to graduate school. But yeah, it started because I had my own kids, basically. And I wanted them to have a good education, and it just kind of expanded to where we ended up starting. We started a school, my husband and I started a school in Detroit, and then we started a school in North Carolina.
So how old is your eldest child then now?
He's 46.
46. So backstage, can you just share the learn to read books and the pictures of that? So just for anyone watching, that I also have purchased these learn to read. It's just like a program, right? It's just like a series of books.
It's a whole literacy program, yes, to teach children how to read English.
So you've gone from, let's say, 40 odd years ago, not knowing what to do, but you guided and mentored, and out from you came this this teacher. But you've now created this beautiful set of books, these products here with the talking pen. Do you want to talk about this? And
yeah, well, this was a project actually started in London. By that time I already had my PhD in education, and I already had 30 years of teaching children that I had done. But I went to the Institute of Education in London, and I was able to get training there from the top literacy experts literally in the world. And they trained me in how, because I'd been teaching kids to read, but I hadn't developed a curriculum to teach kids to read. So they guided me in developing this curriculum. They were a great help, and they guided me initially and then ongoing. I ended up then working in New Zealand, and I got to work under the mentorship of Beverly Randall, who was the chief literacy writer for Nelson Thorne's publishing. She had written over 800 children's books to teach children how to read. And so she was also very much guiding me through the process, as well as one member of our Bhakti community, Dwarka Puri, who was a leading literacy expert in New Zealand. And there's a lot of unique features about these books. One unique feature is that there's audio integrated into the physical pages, so that when you touch the pages talk, and they talk in 25 languages. So you can hear the story in English and Russian, in Hindi and Bengali, in Japanese.
Well, I can vouch for that. Because in the back, there's like it was amazing actually that there's a pen and it touches a certain point and that chooses the language. And then you touch that onto the kind of line that you have to read, and a voice comes forth from the pen and reads it. And so that my kids learned to read like that just from hearing. And actually like my son loves Japanese and my daughter loves Spanish. I'm sure some of this has got something to do with it, just that inquisitive nature, and that just having the access to it as well, the option to just go, oh well, what does that sound like in Hindi, or what does that sound like in French? Right? That's just the children, they're inquisitive, right?
Yes, and then the pictures also talk.
Yes.
So each book has practically a second story in the pictures.
Yeah.
So we had that, and then we have corresponding activity books, and there's so many unique features about this program. One, for anybody who knows anything about education and pedagogy, they combine phonics with whole language learning. And I had been told that was impossible. Everyone said, you're not going to be the phonics people and the whole language people hate each other. Like the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland, like they just hate each other. They don't want to be in the same room with each other. And they say, only phonics, only whole language. So I said, well, why not use both? And then I also use two phonic systems, one called synthetic phonic and one whole word analytic phonics. So I was also combining two phonic systems that are normally at war with each other. And it was coordinated to the UK government system, letters and sounds. So any school in the UK that was using the mandated letters and sounds would have everything coordinated. In addition, it was coordinated with the United States system of whole language called Fountas and Pinnell. So everything was coordinated with that. And then on top of that, it was coordinated with the international system that came out of New Zealand called Reading Recovery. We can use those words there because those are trademark words, but it was coordinated with the letters and sounds, with Funness and Pinnell, and with Reading Recovery. In addition, it was coordinated with the UK color book band system, and it combined analytic whole word phonics, synthetic phonics, and whole language. Nobody had ever done that. It was a complete revolution in reading instruction to do something like that. Unfortunately, because the stories are about Krishna, most of the education world didn't really pay attention to it. So they didn't really come and say, oh my God, who did that? How did that happen? What is that? But all the stories are about Krishna or something that's supportive of Krishna consciousness and bhakti culture and devotional culture, ecological living. And then what we got from Beverly Randall, she looked at some of my initial drafts and she said, these are all rubbish. She said, you really have to make every book, even these beginning books, a real story with a real beginning, middle, and end, and with children as the hero. And I taught hundreds of kids how to read, and I will tell you that most books to teach kids how to read are boring, and then again, they're boring. They are never the kind of books that a child would read for fun.
No.
Never. I've not seen any literacy program, and I have reviewed dozens and dozens of them, both as a teacher and in writing this series, that any child would ever read for fun. And think about the irony of this. So here you want to teach a child to read, but you're giving them material to read that is extremely boring. So we had, Krishna is naturally attractive. Any story about Krishna is naturally attractive. And thank you, Beverly Randall. It had a real plot. And then because, I hope you excuse my enthusiasm here, because we had combined a whole language approach with phonics, because we had used phonics, the books were systematic in the way a child would learn a language. English language is very difficult to learn. Yeah. It's kind of a mess. But because we were using phonics, it was a system that the kids could figure out. But because we were using whole language, it was also holistically age and level appropriate. Yeah. The combination of all of those things, that we were taking the best from all of the approaches, and the stories were about Krishna, and they were actually interesting, means that most kids were learning how to read with this program very quickly. And they were really loving it. Another thing we did, which was innovative, is that usually you read the storybook and then you have exercises afterwards. Whereas we did a lot of preparatory exercises, then the storybook, then exercises afterwards. 2/3 of the exercises were preparatory, which meant that by the time the kid opened the storybook, they were already primed to be successful. So instead of opening up the book and struggling to read it, they were opening up the book and being like 80-90% successful, even with the new words. Then you add to all of that magic pen. Now we had 200 people internationally work to get that magic pen stuff done. Because, if you think about it, it means every book had to be translated into 24 languages in writing. So we had to get a translator, and then someone had to check the written translation. Then every book had to be read in those different languages, English and the other 24 languages.
And recorded, yeah.
And recorded. And then all those recordings had to be edited. And usually the person who wrote the translation and checked the translation was different from the person who's read. And, because we were working at that time in London, we were able to find people who could read most languages right there in London. But in some cases that wasn't true, and we had to farm it out and get somebody to read it in Thailand, and send it over to us. So it was And that took a couple years, 200 people over a couple years to do that. But when you put the whole thing together, you got this package that was so attractive to children that they just loved it, and they learned how to read just effortlessly. The biggest blocks we found to this is that people think, well, if it's about Krishna, then it can't be educationally good. It must just be something about Krishna. It must just be religious. And ironically, we've also had a difficulty that schools and teachers think, well, we're only going to adopt a program that has at least 2 weeks of training to use it. But we designed the program so that it was plug and play.
Yeah. That
even a parent with absolutely no teaching experience could open up the box and just use it.
Yeah.
But we found that the parents and the homeschoolers, they didn't have any trouble opening it up and using it. But the schools, they said, where's your 2-week training program?
No, it really is that easy. So any parents out there, or any grandparents out there, please do check out this lovely program for helping kids read. And I have that bugbear with the English language in that sense. It has so many red words. Sanskrit is phonetic, it's logical, all of that. And some people who have dyslexia, that it's difficult. Whereas phonetics for me is like the way forward. I wanted to talk about some other books before we.
Well, before we do that, we should say that Learn to Read is being digitized. It's in the final stages of being digitized, and it's very soon going to be available as a program that kids can access on a computer or an iPad or something like that.
Brilliant. Good. So, Maipur, if you're there, if you could just share some of the books that Urmila Mataji has also produced. There was Essence Seeker, and there's some lectures on Manashiksha. So let's see what we get. Okay, yeah. So this is a bit more of a heavier book than ABC.
That's at the other end of the spectrum.
This is the other end. So I wanted to actually just do this because I just wanted to show the people the versatility of yourself. Like you've gone literally from someone who's just starting to read to then someone who's trying to master their mind. So you got Shri Manashiksha. So Manashiksha means, if you could just briefly expand on.
It means splendid instructions to the mind. This is a book for advanced practitioners of Bhakti Yoga. I mean, beginners could also read it and get something out of it, but it is a book for advanced practitioners. And it's a step-by-step guide how to enter into the highest realms of bhakti. It was written about 500 years ago by one of our great saints, Raghunath Das Goswami. There was a commentary written about 150 years ago by Bhakti Vinod. And we also include in this particular edition commentaries by contemporary practitioners of Bhakti Yoga. We have 12 full-color illustrations commissioned especially for this, and 120 black and white illustrations. But we have a lot of classes on it that are available online.
Brilliant. I've got 2 more pictures. Maipur, you got, I think, Essence Seeker, or the one on mantra is there. What's he going to throw up? Let's see. Okay, yeah. So this is another book that you've authored.
Yeah, that was so much fun.
Yeah. Tell us, what will someone get if they read this one?
Well, this is a novel. It's an allegorical novel. So if you ever read, say, Siddhartha or if you ever read The Alchemist, it's in that kind of a genre, that it's an allegorical story of the search for enlightenment, for the search for absolute truth. And all the allegories are taken from sacred literature. So the allegories are taken from the Splendid Instructions to the Mind. The allegories are taken from the Bhagavad Purana. But taking those allegories from the scriptures, from the sacred writings, and then weaving a story around it. So.
Brilliant. We've got one more before we close. Maipur, if you throw that one up, please. So, yeah, the great mantra for mystic meditation.
This is a very simple, short, about 100-page guide to chanting Hare Krishna, how to chant effectively. Did you find the picture of the Gita illustration too? The illustrated Bhagavad Gita?
We'll set that as a task, Maipur, if you could look that up. So, okay, so what's what actually inspired you to become an author in that? So was it just a natural progression, or was it something you said, I'm going to do this, or how did that come about?
Oh my, I mean, when I was in high school, I had some of my poetry published, and I always liked to write. I would say what started was I was writing some articles for our Back to Godhead magazine, and I was writing some curriculum guides for our Hare Krishna school. That was really what started it. But I always liked to write poetry. I mean, it's one of my very fun things to do.
Okay, that's good. So while Marpa is looking for that, what would you say to parents that have got children they want to introduce Bhakti to them, like they've kind of grown up a little bit? We're not talking about young kids, because we've got quite a few students who are, let's say, 40 and above, so their children are like teenagers or even in their 20s, but they haven't really brought up, you know, in a Bhakti filled house. So how would you start?
If you're talking about your children are already like 15 to 25,
yeah,
then you're really, you know, they're hardly children anymore.
that's true.
And you know, we've got this wonderful program there in the UK, the Pandavasena, specifically for people of that age group.
Yeah.
Now, we do have some books on my website on urmiladevidasi.org. So I do have some books there for youth and adults, and for children and youth. We have our festival books that have wonderful activities that go through age 18. And then we have for youth and adults, a whole guide to Bhakti Yoga. I mean, I would say one of the most important things for people of that age is to be doing some practical, enlivening service in the Sangha for the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. To use their talents, use their interests to do something practical in the mission.
Nice. So Marpa's radio silence means he's either waiting or hasn't got anything. So I'm just going to wait for him to do something. But I think in closing, we've got like about 5 minutes left. Thank you for being with us for a whole hour. What would you say is your kind of overall advice for our students? What hopefully we've demonstrated is that you've got longevity in your bhakti. Like, it's that teenager till now. How can it not just be like a phase or a fad? You know, how can we actually have longevity in our bhakti?
Probably the answer to that is going to be very different for different people. You know, my own deep love is in scripture and in philosophy. That's my main source of inspiration. And where I go, if I have, you know, not if, where I go when things are difficult, or, you know, when there's some question, that's where I go. Other people may go to their prayers, other people may go to their meditation or to their worship. I mostly go to scripture. That's for me my primary shelter. Other people may go to maybe their devotee friends. I mean, I do all of that as well. I go to my chanting, I go to my worship, I go to my devotee friends. But again, my main rootedness is going to be in the scripture. And not just philosophy, but in the descriptions of Krishna, the descriptions of the spiritual world, the descriptions of the devotees. I mean, for me, that's everything. And certainly I'm very blessed to have many good friends on this bhakti path that provide me with enlivenment and faith and hope, that I see them and I think, well, maybe I'm having a bad day, but look at them, you know. And I get inspiration from them. It's good to have other people with you on the journey. I mean, many times we say that well, you know, in our lingo, the association of devotees, you know, is everything. Okay, that's my personal website. There I have like some of my poetry and some of my articles and things like that.
Hmm. So I was just reflecting back on that, because what you said was really nice, like making sure we have people that we can lean on. You know, if the more people on this journey, the longer we can
I hope I
go.
don't lean on them too much. I hope I more dance with them than lean
More
on them.
dance with them. That's nice.
I hope I more dance with them
Yeah, that's
and
nice.
then lean on them. I have leaned on a lot of people in my life, but I'm trying more and more not to. I'm trying more and more to dance with my friends rather than lean on them.
Cool. So Michael has just put up your website, which those articles will be there. Let me just say it out. So it's urmiladasi.com. That's spelled URMILADASI.com. And it's throwing something else up. There we go. He's found. Well done, Michael. Get a gold star for that. An illustrated introduction. Oh, actually, I have this. I do have this. In fact, my wife has used this. With the kids as well. I do actually have this as well. So yeah, please, anyone watching, listening, please do use this as a resource. So we're looking at the Bhagavad Gita, just to reflect back on everything. Get your resources, get people who you can dance with on this journey. Crack it open, use it for what it, in terms of yoga, you use it in terms of spiritualizing your livelihood. And actually, one last thing. What's your latest project then? What's your latest thing that you're...
Okay, I've got 1 minute to tell you about my latest project. Well, hopefully this year, we'll have 2 more books coming out, each with a co-author. And one is going to be published by BBT Africa. My co-author is Kamala Sita, aka Dr. Irene, what's her married name? I can't remember her married name. Her name was Brand. I don't remember her married name. Oh, I'm sorry, Kamala Sita. Anyway, she and I are writing a series it's in the last editing stages, a series of meditations on how you can find Krishna in the light of the sun, Krishna in the taste of water, Krishna in the clouds, Krishna in the trees, Krishna in the blowing wind, Krishna in your intelligence and your abilities. So we have nearly 300 meditations like that, how we can be aware of the divine, how we can be aware of Krishna in everything in our life. And that's in the final editing. It's fully illustrated by Nadia Bihari, and that is going to be published by BBT Africa. Then the other book I'm working on with the co-author, Rukmini, aka Dr. Ruchira Datta. Kamala Sita has her PhD in education, as I do. Rukmini has her PhD in mathematics. And that book is also now, it's going to be ready in a few days to send to our test readers. Wow. That's called Career Dharma, the Natural Art of Work. And it's how to spiritualize your livelihood, how to take all the principles from the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavad Purana. We also have a lot of empiric research in there. And what are the main principles of career dharma? So matching your propensity to your career, regular connection with the divine. I mean, we have a list of principles. And we looked at that on an individual level. Then we also looked at that from a societal level. So we also have a chapter vision for a whole society. And then we have something called mathematical eco-sociology, where we're proposing how to have sustainable, regenerative business models in the world, where we actually transform ordinary life. So both these books are about transforming ordinary life. One is about transforming ordinary life through your consciousness and your vision, where you see God everywhere. And the other is about transforming the livelihoods and the careers of everybody in the world, so that we produce a truly God-conscious society.
Wow, that is one to look forward to. I'm sure we'll hear about it, and we will certainly share that with our network as well. So that's taken us to the hour. I feel like I've rushed you at the end, so we're going to have to get you on for another podcast in the future.
After those books are published, you can get me back on and we'll talk about that. Yeah,
brilliant. It sounds fascinating, just the meditations themselves, and then also spiritualizing your livelihood and everything you just said about sustainable, what did you say? Reproducible, sustainable?
regenerative, sustainable and regenerative.
Oh, wow.
A world that is wise, true, honorable, just, sustainable, regenerative, beautiful, and supportive.
Wow. That is a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much for being with us and
Thank you for
sharing
having
your
me.
time. Thank you. And yeah, we'll see you again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.